Okay, so video number 2, feel free to look through this chart and you will see what each one of these things do. You're looking at zinc, for example, is it's actually a very common micronutrient deficiency, especially in legumes. So in bean plants, the legumes need zinc for seed production. So if you have really good looking soybeans or edamame or something, or peas or something, and they're not actually producing peas, the plant looks good, but there's no seeds. It's very possible that you have a zinc deficiency. So these are the things that each one of these minerals or micronutrients help to do, and it will help you identify what could be wrong with your plant. Okay, again, the law of the minimum, that's what this bucket represents. If any one element is deficient, the plant will not grow and develop properly, even if all the other elements are present. So that's sort of like a bucket idea, the law of the minimum. Okay, so mobility in plants. This is going to be your phloem for minerals. It's translocated after it has been incorporated into metabolites, which one of these are mobile and some of them are immobile. So sometimes you have maybe some kind of deficiency, and it's not because there's not enough, it's because it just can't get there. It's just an immobile nutrient. It can't actually get where it's going to go. The movement is blocked somehow. So you see that very often. You also see an important thing to remember is that minerals are going to move from a source to the sink. So if the source is from the soil, they will move up here to this new leaf, which is the sink. That's what needs the most of the nutrients. Another source is going to be this leaf, especially of carbon, right? So the photosynthesis is going to come from this leaf, but it's going to be put into this new leaf because this new leaf is a sink. It's not producing enough photosynthesis to, carry itself. So it's a sink. So it'll move it from here, which is a source, to here, which is a sink. The main sink is going to be your fruits, your flowers, your seeds. If you had a fruit or a bud up here, all of the nutrients from the soil, from the photosynthesis, all of that would be moving to, if this was, say, like a fruit or a flower or something, it would be moving here. So remember, nutrients go from source to sink. Okay. Mobile means they can be translocated. The elements can be scavenged to be moved from old to new tissue. So from that source of the old photosynthetic tissue to new tissue that needs it. Typically the deficiencies show up in the older tissue. So that's all of a sudden your leaves on the bottom are starting to get yellow and you're like, why? Those leaves were just healthy. That's because all the deficiency is actually in the top and it's moving it. It's like sacrificing the lower leaves for the upper leaves. And if you just think about the way shade works, that actually makes sense for a plant to sacrifice the lower leaves to keep the upper leaves healthy. So your deficiency will typically show up on the bottom of the plant or your older leaves. It's kind of counterintuitive because people think, oh, the new leaves don't have enough boron. Why is it not showing in the new leaves? Well, it's not showing in the new leaves because the old leaves are sacrificing their boron for the new leaves. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium are the most mobile, so you will see those deficiencies definitely in the old plants. Iron is the least mobile, so the deficiencies will show up in newer growth because the old leaves can't sacrifice themselves. It's just another way to pinpoint what the deficiency is and what might be going on. So if you have a deficiency in your new growth, it's probably an immobile nutrient, such as iron. Okay, again, NPK are your main, and some magnesium. Then you got calcium and iron are also on there as potentially, you will see in this old growth, you will see the most mobile nutrients, which is NPK, magnesium. These will sacrifice these lower leaves and send the NP and K up to these newer leaves. These guys are not nearly as mobile, right? So you will see the deficiency in the new growth. Okay, again, some plant deficiency guides, there's a bunch of them out there. But you can say lower leaves turn yellow from the outside, veins remain green. That's probably magnesium versus potassium yellowing at the tips and edges in younger leaves. Dead patches. Iron, young leaves are yellow. This is not mobile, so it's affecting these new young leaves, because this leaf down here can't sacrifice its iron because it's immobile. It can't move it. Versus phosphate, leaves are darker than normal and they just fall off. That's your phosphate. Sometimes it's like a purple color. I'll show you what it looks like. So basically that is mobile enough that it can send all the phosphate to these younger leaves and sacrifice itself because it's mobile. Okay, so let's talk about nitrogen. Probably this is the most important nutrient in terms of plant growth and just generally. It's found in all proteins, DNA, RNA, ATP, NADH, NADPH, many other metabolites, and it's probably the most common plant deficiency. If somebody's like, there's something wrong, it's usually almost always nitrogen. You can go out, it looks yellow, it's happening to the lower leaves, probably going to be a nitrogen deficiency. There's some other ones that you'll see that also have this yellow color, but by and large, start with nitrogen because that's usually the culprit. It's the deficiency. Here's your nitrogen deficiency, right there, very yellow. And probably the reason it's usually, there are two reasons that it's the primary deficiency that you see. One, it uses the most. It really needs a lot of nitrogen. A plant needs a ton of nitrogen. And two, there's a relatively low level of soil availability. Even though there's nitrogen everywhere, there's only a couple forms that the plant can actually take up. So it gets deficient very quickly. There are three natural forms: gas, organic compounds, and inorganics. That's going to be your ammonium and your nitrate. Only two of these forms can be absorbed by plants. It cannot absorb the gaseous form of nitrogen. Can't do it. So that is considered unavailable to plants. Here's your basic cycle. So here's your fertilizer and your atmospheric nitrogen that can't be used by plants. It goes in and eventually it's assimilated into amino acids by the hyphae. That can sometimes happen with your mycorrhiza that fixes nitrogen. That's a bacteria that takes whatever is there in a form the plant can't use and puts it in a form that it can use, in this case NH4. Also, there's just some there. There's some NO3 and some NH4, some nitrate, and some ammonium. It's already there, and it will go into the plant. You also have mineralized, basically ammonification, so it's going into ammonia, and sometimes it leaches out, and sometimes it's used by the plant. So if the plant doesn't absorb it immediately and it rains, this leaches into the Mississippi River and other things. And this essentially is my job. Just in case you wanted to know what I do this. Leaching and immobilization. I look at that and how much fertilizer we actually need on plants and the timing. A lot of what I do is look at when is this corn root going to take up the nutrients? When should we actually fertilize the plant? And are there ways we can get this root to be a little bit more efficient so we don't lose all of this down into the water table? You also have fixation by other things, and you just have immobilization back up and volatilization back up into the air. This is very common, and now we have a lot more sensors. If you go out into a cornfield, you'll see all of our research plots now are looking at NH3 volatilization and how much we're being lost, because maybe this process is going very well, but it's possible that it's leaching out into the air, and we don't want that to go. Okay, the nitrogen cycle. Again, there's a nitrogen cycle. It's a thing. It's a series of reactions, usually forms into an organic. That makes things available to the plant. Inorganic forms cycle back into organic forms. So you'll see that it cycles back. Hopefully it's not leached out into the environment. The conversion of N2 to inorganic this can actually happen through lightning strikes, rain and snow. It can happen through nitrogen fixation bacteria, through ammonification of microbes, and nitrification. All of these are various microbial communities that help keep the nitrogen available to plants. Then you also have immobilization, where the microbes use excess nitrogen for their own biological process and actually take the nitrogen from the plant, and then the plant can't use it. So this is the nitrogen cycle. Again, nitrogen fixation is by rhizobia. You want these little nodules on your soybean plant because they're actually making your nitrogen available to your plant. So you want them. If you don't have them, your plant is unhealthy. Your plant will not fix nitrogen, and that is bad. So you want those.